Calm? The Wilkerson family lived there. That much is certain. A man, his wife, their 2 children, and his aging sister. They arrived in the summer of 1882. Records show they bought the home for $14 and a black gelding inherited from a debt owed by a distant uncle.
Building unease.
The estate had been abandoned for over 2 decades. Locals called it the widow's bones. No one knows why. Soft. At first, the Wilkersons were like any other small-town family. Jonathan, the father, worked at the mill. Elizabeth, the mother, kept a tidy garden, brought homemade preserves to church socials. The children, June and little Thomas, played by the river and carved their names into the white oak out front. But the house changed them. The first sign was Elizabeth's diary. Clay, discovered years later in the attic, bound in cracked leather and missing half its pages. It begins with sweetness, recipes, notes about the children, the new curtains. Dark turn, slow. Then, somewhere in October, her handwriting begins to change.
Messier, slanted, the lines curve upward. She starts writing, only at night.
And then she mentions him, but never says who he is. He was in the well again tonight, but he never climbs out, only whispers. Jonathan thinks I'm unwell, but I saw him in the mirror, not myself. Pace creeping dread. By late November, they stopped attending church. No letter sent. The garden grew wild. A neighbor boy delivering eggs claimed he saw June standing outside in a snowstorm, barefoot, in her night dress, staring at the barn door.
Passa.
She didn't blink. She didn't move. He ran home and never went back. Weeks passed. Silence. On January 4th, 1883, a pastor and 2 townsmen climbed the hill to check on the family. They never made it to the front door. They came back pale as ghosts. One man vomited in the churchyard. The pastor never preached again. None would say what they saw, only that no one should open that door again. The sheriff nailed a sign on the gate.
Unfit for living, do not enter.
And the house has stood empty ever since. But here's the thing. Low whisper. Someone lit a candle in the upstairs window last winter. And no one has been inside for over 140 years.
By the time the magistrate and the village vicar arrived at Lornewood Estate later that day, a thick fog had rolled in from the moors. It curled around the stone walls like a shroud, making the house feel less like a place and more like a fading memory. The townsfolk stood at a distance, unwilling to go closer than the rusted gate. Word had already spread about the servant girl's scream, the blood-stained hallway, and the master's locked study. No one had dared open it. The study was dark, untouched. An oil lamp still flickered. A glass of port sat on the desk, half full, the chair pushed back as if someone had stood up in a hurry. And then there were footprints, muddy small, like a child's. But the Peregrines had no children. On the windowsill, a porcelain doll sat upright. No one had ever seen it before. Its glassy black eyes stared at the door. "I swear to you," whispered the housekeeper, pale as ash, "there was no doll in this house." They searched every floor, every cellar, every room. Not a single sign of the Peregrines. But inside the nursery, a room unused for decades, the walls were covered in writing, in what looked like dried blood or soot. Lornewood Estate was sealed and abandoned. The vicar refused to return. The town stopped speaking of it aloud. And to this day, if you pass that fog-choked estate on a still night, some say you'll hear a voice whisper from within the stone,